Doesn't work out, let me know.
I think. Yep, it's recording. Okay, so let's bow in, everybody. And Philip, I think you're leading off tonight.
I am. So welcome everyone, and thank you for carving time out of your lives to study the Dharma. It's a noble thing to do. So tonight we're going to continue with Vipassana, and we'll go ahead with chapter 47, investigating the subtleties of experience. So you'll remember the last chapter we studied described the gradual blossoming of Vipassana, which leads to the understanding and experience of emptiness, egolessness, shunyata. And these are all synonyms. Shunyata is the key to everything. So Chogyam Trungpa begins this chapter by coming back to shamatha, pointing out that shamatha must come first, that shamatha is necessary in order for us to hear the teachings properly. Shamatha conquers undisciplined mind, monkey mind. Shamatha tames the wild horses. Shamatha creates the space for Vipassana to work. The work of Vipassana is to conquer individualistic mind, ego mind. Ego mind is the veil that obscures our understanding and experience of emptiness, egolessness, shunyata. Chogyam Trungpa reemphasizes the point that Vipassana is a 27-4 endeavor, on and off the cushion. He says, I quote, "Your entire life, 24 hours a day, is pure awareness." He says awareness is a result of being perked up by shamatha. He also reemphasizes the point that shamatha practice continues throughout the whole of Buddhist practice. Then the chapter drills down into 4 categories of Vipassana, providing an overview of Vipassana's increasing refinement. So you can sort of think of it as a triangle. The first category, the base, is called discriminating dharmas. And dharma here is used as a synonym for phenomena in general, all phenomena, internal, like thoughts and feelings, and external, everything that we experience and see in our world. So the first, discriminating dharmas. The second, fully discriminating dharmas. The third, completely comprehending dharmas. And the fourth, completely investigating dharmas. So the first, discriminating dharmas. In Tibetan, that's Cho Nampar Jepa. And people sometimes ask why we use so many of the Tibetan words, and it's because of a problem with translation between the 2 languages. So think of Dharma that we just used, right? Usually we think of Dharma to mean the teachings of the Buddha, but in this chapter, it has a very different meaning. Or think of the word mind. The Tibetans have more words for mind than the Eskimos have for snow. Or awareness, we've used that word already in tonight's talk. And that has so many meanings, it's almost meaningless. But discriminating dharmas, Cho Nampar Jepa. So this has to do with confidence, with not being overwhelmed by the vastness of your experience. This is that huge base. So with Vipassana, we see everything. You experience everything. Chogyam Trungpa says, you experience everything. You see everything clearly, and there's a lot to see. It can be shocking, but you don't turn away. You depend on mindfulness and awareness, shamatha and vipassana together. The second, fully discriminating dharmas, Raptu Jepa. Chogyam Trungpa says, having overcome your initial shock, you develop curiosity. Once you have seen what's in your mind, you investigate. You feel out what's happening. You experience it. You want to find out how things occur and what they are like. So the idea of the second category is that whatever occurs, you investigate that particular phenomenon. Above all, what you're doing here is you are looking at phenomena directly. So Buddhists will use the expression sometimes, looking at its face. So you're looking at phenomena directly and finding out how phenomena arise, dwell, and disappear. And we'll come back to that in this chapter, how phenomena arise, dwell, and disappear. So that's a big part, how phenomena arise, dwell, and disappear. This is impermanence. This is the heart of the Hinayana teachings. This is also the beginning of insight into emptiness, shunyata, the heart of the Mahayana teachings. Then we go into number 3, completely comprehending dharmas. So we're moving up into more and more focused vipassana, more and more focused, clear seeing, completely comprehending dharmas, Yangsu Tokpa. Here we move beyond perceptions in general, perceptions being the outside things that we see, right? Remember we were talking about the levels of consciousness, and the bottom 6 would be the 5 sense consciousnesses. So they're all perceptions, the outside things. The 6th one is the mind consciousness, and that's the one that also looks inward, thoughts, feelings, emotions. This is part of Dharma as well, and this is where we are here. Here we move beyond perceptions in general and into the investigation of thoughts in particular, albeit on a crude, coarse, big level. These can be enormous thoughts, very aggressive, very passionate, or very ignorant. What Chogyam Trungpa was talking about here are the 3 poisons: passion, aggression, and ignorance. Thoughts that have evolved into feelings and then into emotions. The 3 kleshas. Okay so far? What Chogyam Trungpa says next is nothing less than a sea change. So if you're new on the path, this is where you really want to pay attention, because it's entirely different from what you've been taught up to this point, and a hugely important next step in your progress on the path. So he says, and I quote, whether such thoughts occur during sitting practice or during post-meditation experience, you could study them and look at them. You could exert your awareness on them. He goes on to say, and this is very important, this is not the same as being mindful of thoughts. In mindfulness practice, you're just seeing thoughts and labeling them thinking. Here, there is a more general awareness of the presence of crude thoughts. With an awareness of the atmosphere created by your crude thought process, your passion, aggression, or ignorance, you're able to see such thoughts one by one, piece by piece, rather than suddenly being hit by some big thought and being completely overwhelmed. He goes on to explain, I quote him again, you look at your thoughts and you dissect them. You notice how they arise, how they dwell, and how they disappear. So you really look at them. Okay. So what does this really mean? What is he really talking about? It means you begin to notice the empty nature of thoughts, shunyata. That's what Vipassana is all about. It's not just that thoughts are impermanent, although they certainly are impermanent. Even more importantly, thoughts have no single solid substance. They are not unitary. They are instead just an assembly of component parts. He says, you look at your thoughts one by one, piece by piece. And beyond that, thoughts have no independent existence. They only exist in relation to other things. So think about this. You can't have sorrow without joy, any more than you can have dark without light, or down without up. Everything is related to everything else. Does this make sense? Consider sorrow on the one hand, right? So you've got regular sorrow here. And on the other hand, you've got joy. It seems pretty straightforward. Everyone would choose joy. So keep sorrow where it is, but in your other hand, put, say, unimaginable anguish. Suddenly the sorrow has totally changed its nature. Nobody would choose unimaginable anguish over sorrow, but it's the same sorrow, which is the same thing as saying it's not the same thing at all, which is what this is about. They have no independent existence. They only exist in relation to other things. So thoughts. So he's telling us over and over and over here to look at our thoughts, look at them in their face, understand their nature. That's the lesson of this chapter. He goes on to say, you don't panic. You just examine what has happened to you. There is a sense of decency about this. When a crude emotion lands on your lap, you see it and dissect it with vipassana. This is possible because you have practiced enough shamatha to begin with. Therefore, your mind is able to handle anything that happens. Once you have worked with shamatha thoroughly, you cannot be shocked. This is an enormously important concept, and he enjoins us to begin working with it now. So then we move on to the fourth category, completely investigating dharmas, Yangsu Chopa. Here we extend the investigation to much more subtle thoughts. We're coming down from the big emotions, passion, aggression, and ignorance. Much more subtle thoughts, the small, seemingly meaningless and insignificant flickers of thought that occur. Here, Chogyam Trungpa postulates that we have a kind of surveillance system, a constant low-grade awareness, and that this awareness is critically important. So this metaphor might work. In medicine, there's this concept of a tumor surveillance system. And we have immune cells that go throughout our body looking for individual cancerous cells. And when they find one, they destroy it, cutting the samsara at the root. That's what Chogyam Trungpa is talking about here. Think back to the chapter we studied earlier called Cutting the Root of Samsara, where the whole idea was to deal with problems while they were still small. That's what he's teaching us here. Let me digress a little bit, because we have been talking a tiny bit about Patrul Rinpoche and his book, Words of My Perfect Teacher. And he comes up with this teaching from Thongpa Rinpoche about thoughts. So Thongpa Rinpoche says, it is much better from the very beginning to take the attitude of not getting involved in any thoughts whatsoever. On the other hand, thoughts do occur during meditation, and we don't really like not to think them because they are interesting or because they seem important. Therefore, Patrul Rinpoche said, clobber the pig on the snout. Right? It's like a Vermont expression. It's great. Clobber the pig on the snout. If a pig has slipped into your garden and starts eating the flowers, barley or whatever, it is not going to stop munching no matter how much you beat it on the back, but hit it over the nose and it will run straight out of your garden. Similarly, it is best to simply cut thoughts at their root. How do you do that? You look them in their face. You examine their nature. You look at how they rise, how they seem to exist, and how they disappear. Because the fact is, there's nothing there. Chogyam Trungpa concludes this chapter with some general comments about ego. He says, wandering mind, confusion, and the inability to discipline oneself, all those factors derive from the fundamental principle of ego. He reemphasizes the point that the ultimate reason for practicing Vipassana is the subjugation of ego, which is to say, to understand and experience its emptiness. He encourages us to add a little bit of Vipassana to our basic shamatha discipline. He goes further and says again, we could practice Vipassana during all our waking hours, taking a shower, brushing our hair, pressing our clothes, if anyone does that anymore, preparing a cup of tea, everywhere, all the time. What Chogyam Trungpa is driving home here is this, that with everything we do, with everything we experience, with everything we think, we need to ask over and over and over again, what is the nature of this experience, this dharma, this phenomena, this awareness itself? How does it arise? How does it dwell? How does it disappear? This is Vipassana, the investigation of experience. This is what will lead you to the understanding and experience of emptiness, egolessness, shunyata. And shunyata is the key to everything. That's what this chapter is about. Where did this come from? How does it exist? Where does it go? Thanks for listening. I'll turn this over to John for additions, corrections, and then to John Tyler, I think, to decide whether to do questions now or later. We could always, if we have lots of questions, carry them over to next Wednesday as well. That's what the class discussion is for.
Let's let John begin with the next chapter and take it. And then we'll have discussion after he finishes.
Very good. Good evening. And I'm going to speak about chapter 48, which is titled Sharpening One's Perception. And Trungpa says right at the outset, whatever is knowable in the world of either relative or transcendent nature can be understood and experienced by means of Vipassana meditation. Following on to Philip's discussion. Vipassana leads to complete understanding of the knowable. It allows us to distinguish between our conceptual story and the actual present reality. This means that the attitude and approach of Vipassana opens our way of thinking, that is not being lost rather in the stories we tell ourselves necessarily, so that obstacles to learning are no longer prominent. And this leads into the concept of sawa, meaning searching. And in this context, Trungpa says that better to look at that word as meaning discovery. The point is that through our Vipassana practice, by means of hearing and seeing the Dharma truly, clearly, and without stories, we can make 6 discoveries. And that's what I'll speak to. 6 types of sawa. Number 1 is meaning. Tun sawa is the discovery of meaning or truth. It is connected here with an interest in language and the expressions of language. It is understanding of the grammar used to express dharmic language. In this discovery, we rely more on the sense of the teachings than on the words, the sense of the teachings, rather than on the words. You develop a trust as you begin to realize that you have the potential of knowledge and wisdom within yourself, not unlike Buddha nature. You realize that the Dharma is a question of waking up rather than cultivating knowledge. a little bit of a transition from finding the solution in a book. This discovery means that you have an understanding of how language works and what happens when you talk dharmically. The basic point in regard to language is to have precision. He emphasizes that. You understand an idea is initiated, then described, then understood. The idea here is simply to articulate and synchronize language with your state of mind. Tunsawa is an understanding of the grammar used to express dharmic language. Vipassana discipline allows us to ponder our thinking process, as Philip has already pointed out, and how we relate to words in that process. So that's the first discovery, the discovery of meaning. The second discovery is form, discovering the objects of inside and outside. It's in Sanskrit is, I'm going to probably not pronounce this right, is Nopo Sawa. Nopo is an object or gross thing. It is thingness or tangibleness. Sawa, again, is discovery. And in this discovery, we learn to discriminate between our individual thoughts and emotions and the world around us. Very important. We are discovering that objects of outside and inside. Inside means personal situations and emotions. Outside means the external setup. This discovery is also called the search for reality. All experiences in life, every word, every situation involves subtleties. And these subtleties, by this discovery, are clearly seen. Once you've had an experience of vipassana, of expanding yourself, in that moment, all neurotic discrimination or conceptual thought and stories, paranoia, and other aspects of your normal consciousness become irrelevant and useless. When you work with the subtleties of the awareness process, you are able to see whether here and there are working together, whether they are synchronized or not synchronized. Then the discovery of inside and outside becomes very powerful. So moving on, the third characteristic is discovering the nature of perception. Senyai Tsawa. Sen meaning mark, sign, or characteristic. Nai meaning itself. So Tensen Nai refers to how things are categorized according to their own individual existence. And Sennai Tsawa is discovery of individual characteristics. This discovery refers to the nature of our perception, how we operate, how you operate your prajna. It is the same for thoughts, listening and hearing, or looking and seeing. You first perceive your world by first thought and how that is then translated into second thought. You are not confused by the basic logic. You can figure out the origin of the thought patterns in communication. As a practitioner of Vipassana, you are not insulted because someone makes a rude remark. You are able to look beyond that to the causal characteristics of the individual's reactions. So that's number 3. Number 4, the fourth discovery is discovering sides. Shak Sawa means discovering sides. Shak means direction or side, and Sawa means discovery. Discriminating the good side from the bad side is easy. You see whether you are on the side of dark or you're on the side of light. On the dark side, you are causing harm to yourself and others, while being on the light side, you are being a positive influence on both yourself and others. This discovery is about knowing what to do and what not to do, discrimination and common sense. Discovering sides is not based on picking and choosing or on making yourself comfortable. It is a broad vision and it has an unyielding quality to it. You're able to seek wisdom, to seek good attributes. In this discovery, you are relating with common norms of good and bad, but with tremendous wisdom and clarity, not with your normal conceptual framework. The fifth discovery is the discovery of past, present, and future. This is Tun Salwa, Tu meaning time, and Salwa again meaning discovery. So this is the discovery of time. This is an interesting one. This discovery means that time should be considered, that is, what you have experienced in the past, what you are experiencing in the present, and what you might experience in the future. And you're not confused by these. The individual, in this case, needs to develop clear thinking so that you remain unconfused by the time. With a clear sense of time, you do not confuse what has happened in the past or what might happen in the future with the present, i.e., what you have experienced is what you have experienced. What you are experiencing is what you are experiencing in the present. And what you might experience is what might happen in the future. And in summary, it is that you could take advantage of your present situation. This you have power over. You have power over the present. The past is finished and the future is yet to come. However, you understand that the future is somewhat predetermined by the present situation, and you realize what you are doing. You have inherited knowledge from the past, therefore you know how to act now in the present, and you can attain what you might attain in the future. So the future is entirely dependent on you. And this is alluding to karma. By practicing Vipassana, you are trying to get out of karmic encirclement. You are trying to cut through karmic cause and effect so that you realize your dignity and elegance. This is the discovery of time. And finally, the sixth insight is the discovery of knowledge, Rigpa Sawa. Rigpa in Tibetan is insight, so Rigpa Sawa means discovery of insight or knowledge in a particular scientific knowledge. In this particular case, the Sanskrit word for knowledge is vidya, or true seeing, which refers to knowledge as well. It refers to the nature of cause and effect, and we have cause and effect. We are here discovering, not in let me rephrase that. It refers to the nature of cause and effect we are here discovering. In other words, we are understanding the nature of karma. Vidya, like science, is based on understanding and trusting the norm of truth that exists in the phenomenal world. The knowledge that comes from Vipassana is based on understanding the elements of fire, water, air, and earth. We need to take into account how much one has taken for granted and ignored the idea of cause and effect of circumstances. When we realize the workings of the elements, we begin to realize the workings also of cause and effect. Through Vidya, we can discover the truth about karma. This allows the kleshas to dry up on their own. So it gives us an advantage of insight into those kleshas. Okay. What did I do here? Okay. Excuse me. Okay. So in conclusion, a applying the 6 discoveries, Vipassana is the heart of the Buddha Dharma. It sets the general tone of the psychology of Buddhism. And in that sense, a Buddhist has clear thinking and an objective view of the world. With Vipassana, as we've been talking about, everything becomes very precise and very direct. On the whole, we are studying Dharma so that we know how to handle our life properly. According to the Vipassana vision of discriminating awareness, wisdom or prajna, which comes from relaxing your mind, with Vipassana, we are training how to live our life once again. That's an important concept. These teachings help you to discover your true intelligence, clearly seeing and understanding. And that concludes this chapter. Thank you.
So we can have discussion, questions, comments, complaints. Vipassana is really the ultimate intelligence. And it goes all the way to the very end of the path. And its name changes as it becomes more powerful along the path. But the practice is always the same. Coming back and resting in awareness here and now, in this space of awareness that we inhabit and live in. It's kind of the ultimate realism. Shamatha is the foundation for it, because shamatha brings us back from dreams. And then having come back, we're awake and aware here, now. There's so many things in this chapter. I mean, I've been studying this for years, and I still feel like I need to contemplate, especially these 6 discoveries. There's one of the discovery of meaning, discovering how language works in its relationship to our lives. You know, the way words point to what our experience is, but are just labels, and yet we get caught up in them, caught up in the labels and the words and the judgments, and lose track of what they're referring to.
What's wonderful there, if I could add a thought to that, is so what all of this comes down to is thinking about our mind and getting rid of that pronoun, because it's not simply our mind or my mind or your mind. And what you're talking about, John, speech, is how we share our minds as human beings. So a huge part of our neocortex is devoted to speech, the verbal cortex. And we don't need speech if we live as an individual. We only need speech to communicate with other individuals, to share our minds with other individuals. So words and language. And that allows us to share our minds across time and across space, because we can write what we're thinking on paper, and 100 years later, someone else can read it. It's astounding. It's still very coarse, and I hope to get to the point in Buddhism where it will just become more direct. But I'm not there yet.
Also, what I think is important to remember or to be aware of, Vipassana is awareness, right? And it means awareness of what? Of the 6 knowals: sights, sounds, smells, tastes, bodily sensations, and mental events. Mental events. That we can see our thoughts just the way you see this finger or hear this word. You can see the thought as it arises and passes, you know, in the in a second, in an instant, that really has no endurance. It's as soon as it appears, it's going. And if we can see that, instead of getting caught up in the dreams and the thoughts, that is the true awareness. Judith. Unmute.
There seems to be, if I understand it correctly, a different level of awareness other than the thought arising and disappearing. It's really noticing on a different level, these 6 levels that were just spoken of. And that particularly the part about language, I think to see it without language is less of a temptation towards involving ego. Is that so?
I think very much, yeah. I mean, Vipassana is just clear awareness without language. Just, I mean, right now, all of us are aware of the computer screen in front of us. We're aware of the sound of this voice. Now that I mention it, you're aware of your bottom, whatever it's sitting on. All of these things are effortless. They just appear, they come and go. We don't even have to think about directing our attention. It happens for us. The attention shifts from one thing to the next.
But
And
when
yeah,
you're saying to yourself, I feel sad, instead of experiencing the sadness, aren't you going more towards ego?
probably, because when you say I feel sad, there's probably an intention behind that. You don't want to feel sad. You know, why? Otherwise, why would you bother saying it to yourself? Instead
Yeah,
of,
it refers to the I feel sad,
right.
instead of just feeling the sadness.
But you can also note it and let it go, the thought. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
you get rid of the sadness.
Right. That's not something I ever glommed onto before. So thanks so much. I don't know, I must have somehow been absent when we did these chapters the first time.
Are you kidding?
Sounds
I
like
feel the same way.
I never heard before, you know. Fascinating.
Yeah, it's always new and fresh. Very something.
Yeah, what I've actually observed is that there, when you can quiet your mind enough, you can start to actually see the sequence of events. You know, that there's like a spark of something that draws your awareness, something manifests. You hear a sound, there's a bodily sensation, a thought, and in that moment, you know what it is. And then you identify it, and then you think about it. And you can actually begin to see this unfolding. And just that first flash, that first spark, I think, isn't it, John, that there's somewhere it says that things manifest and they are self-knowing? There's some, something like that, that like in the instant that it manifests to your attention, you know what it is.
Yeah.
And then you go on, and then the mind, ego, and all that stuff then gets busy evaluating and identifying and thinking about it.
Mhm. Wow. I better read this over a lot of time.
Actually, let's just do something right now. Everybody just take a nice posture, and bring your mind right here into this space, this room. This aware of this screen or whatever you happen to be looking at, and this voice, this sound, wherever your attention goes is fine. And you're effortless in this awareness. Your eyes are open. Your awareness is clear, simple, doesn't need any explanation, interpretation, comment. It's here. This is Vipassana and more. When I say more, it becomes Rigpa or Vidya, as was also translated in the chapter. And this is the effortless, clear awareness that is the heart, the very, very heart of Buddhist practice. All Buddhist practices is this clear, open, effortless, purposeless awareness of whatever is happening now. We can just tune into it, and then our minds will go off into a thought, into a dream, and then we realize that, and we come back to this. This is our fundamental practice. This is Vipassana. And this is instruction is called pointing out, pointing out the state of meditation. Some more comments. Now you can relax. That's a joke. Sarah. Sarah, for some reason we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Oh. I fix my.
Sounds like your input volume on your microphone.
Yeah, like you need to adjust the input volume.
Okay. Let's see.
If you go to where it says the picture of the microphone and there's a caret next to it, and then click that caret, and at the bottom it says audio settings, and you'll see the output level slider, and you want it to go all the way to the right.
Or just lean in close and speak up.
How does this sound?
Pretty good.
Is that better?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Am I hurting your ears now? Okay. Let's see if I can say this the way I want to. So lately, I've been noticing I'll start thinking a negative thought about somebody, say, and what I'll remind myself in that moment is emptiness. I'll remind myself of shunyata. And what I've noticed, and that kind of helps bring me back into awareness, and it allows me to drop that habitual mind train from going off the rails. And what I've been noticing, like last night especially, I was dreaming, I was sleeping, and in my dream, I kept telling myself, this is a dream, this is empty. Drop that thought. And then I woke up and like same thing. Every time I would have a thought, I would notice myself thinking, shunyata, this is a dream, emptiness. And I think I'm using it as like an anchor, kind of like a shamatha element. But I'm kind of feeling like I'm getting too caught up in that anchor. So I'm curious what your thoughts are, because it definitely helps me. It helps stop me in that thought in its track. But it's kind of taking over the just awareness part.
So be aware of that. You see, you are believing in a purpose, and there is no purpose. It's just another dream. The dream of I'm going to get rid of all my thoughts, or I'm going to become a perfect meditator, or whatever it may be. And you just see that and let that go, because the idea is effortlessly here, awake, aware of now. We're all the same.
And also be gentle.
Thanks. That's good.
You guys always say that to me.
We say it to ourselves too.
And I would add this as well, that the more we understand that our thoughts are empty, the more they lose the importance that they previously had to us, and they become like any other object of our sense consciousnesses. So a thought becomes more like a smell or a sound or a physical sensation. And it no longer has that pride of place saying, I'm the most important thing, because it's actually hollow. So there's that. And then there's also this, and John has said this to us so many times, that the thoughts and the sounds and the sights and the smells, they never go away. That's part of the awareness that we live in. That's, Barry uses the expression, it's a scenery going past the window of a moving train. It's always there, but it becomes more background. You worry about it less. It doesn't matter so much. It's hard to put this into words. It's as if they take their proper place. And up to now, they've had this exaggerated importance that they don't really deserve.
Well, I guess I'd like to add that this is kind of coming off. I just finished Peaceful Heart, which, goes over the patience chapter and contemplating the thoughts and why, he really encourages us to kind of look into the thoughts and figure out how to be grateful for people who might be testing your patience. So I guess the idea of me reminding myself that it's empty and dream is kind of helping me drop that storyline, and helping me be more patient, maybe. Does that make sense?
So all of the world exists on a relative level and on an absolute level. And the Mahayanas really, and particularly the Paramitas, they're really on the relative level. So that's all really important stuff. But that's the level at which it exists. The other side's really important stuff too. And they both exist at the same time. So you should feel pleasure in that and solace and joy and what's the word that I want? It's like this huge, wonderful thing.
Van, you're nodding away there. Any thoughts? Sure.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was about to anyway, but thank you. Yeah, just to add on to that, I think, I, like Sarah's example, I think is a great example, and that it's what you're doing is you are short circuiting, you're short circuiting the, some of the story that's attached to the feeling, and the story is what, fuels the feeling. And I think I think he touches on this in A Peaceful Heart, is, or maybe more than touches on it. I'm just getting some of the teachings confused, but it's the thought. And John was talking about this before, about when Judy was, in response to Judy, when he said, there's something behind something behind the sad feeling, such as the intention to want to get rid of it, and I think that's true. But I think we do something even right before that, or more subtle to that, or kind of in addition to that. We label the feelings good or bad, right? And just that subtle level, because it starts out at that very subtle level, bad. I'm feeling sad. This is a bad feeling, as opposed to something more neutral, equanimous, like unpleasant feelings versus pleasant feelings, right? And so and it's hard to come up with a neutral, equanimous word, but I've heard many people refer to it as pleasant or unpleasant feelings, right? And with implying the neutrality of it without the emotional balance of it, like this is a bad thought. Okay, so we start very quickly label sad as bad, and then bad turns into, like what John said, I want to get rid of it. Bad can also turn into, I'm a bad person. What's wrong with me for feeling this? Bad can also turn into, I'm going to feel like this forever, hyperbolically, but more or less. And and it's that value judgment that we put on it, that subtly feeds the stories, and subtly makes it stronger. And if we can be aware of that, recognize that when we're doing it, which is the best we can do, at the time, and then, but subtly, gradually, the more we recognize it, the more it'll lose that, bad or good value that we put on it, because it's just as bad. If you're feeling a pleasurable thought, feeling happy or joy, and we label it as good, then we grasp onto it, and then when we see that it's fleeting, we suffer, from that, right? So, if as we gradually learn to recognize that we're labeling them good or bad, it loses, that kind of energy gets lost, and it becomes more of just a clear seeing of the feeling, which goes back to, we don't have to stop our thoughts or feelings. We can't stop our thoughts or feelings, but we can recognize them. There's a big difference between being lost in thoughts and feelings and recognizing that we're feeling and thinking. A huge difference. It's a difference between being in the now and not being in the now. Just what we say during practice, where we say, whatever you're thinking or feeling, just see it. Don't label it, drop the stories, right? Just see it. And that way we can have them without feeling like we're crazy, right? In a word. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you for that. Mm.
So we're going to practice Vipassana with gusto, joy, with clarity. We're so fortunate, I think, to have found this. It's almost like a secret, because it's so subtle and simple. And unavailable to most people.
And if we ever get caught up in regrets of the past, just
Mm.
remember that every single thing you did, every second, led you right here. If
Mm.
one thing had been different, it'd be different.
Yeah, I've got a regret that I'm actually struggling with. Um, I've done something so that my older daughter won't speak to me for almost 2 years now. And I don't know what it was for sure. I can guess. Um, and it's a source of, the thought is a source of sorrow. But I've decided that all I can do really is watch it come and watch it go and not act on it. What do you think? I know that there are other people in this room too who have similar situations for sure. No, at
I
least
think
on this, huh?
Yeah, I think it's right on the money what you say, because that what you just described is how you are going to relate to it. And then there's the other aspect of it of how you envision that relationship on your side with that other person. And I think the beauty of Buddhism is that it gives you the ability to do what you just described, and at the same time it gives you knowledge of how to deal in an empathetic and what am I trying to say, compassionate way, as opposed on the other side to the clashes of the anger or aggression and the other options you have in terms of reacting to those thoughts. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful gift that we've been given, I
But
think.
the pain and the sadness is still there.
Yes, but you have to look at those and see them for what they are. And I mean, you can't
The
ignore
thought,
them.
oh no,
That's
can't.
it.
Yeah, that is it.
No. But I think the gift really is that you have that ability to experience the pain and the sorrow, without the the kind of ego threat that goes with it when you're you know putting mixing all your emotional stuff into it as well. At least that's I I have realized that, a part of my emotion in the past, a part of my emotional responses to things was a I believe a tool to protect myself, and through my practice, I find I don't need that tool anymore. That I have the ability to look and to see and not to have an emotional reaction. I can feel it myself, but not, have that reaction sort of, they're a bad person because they won't talk to me, and, they're evil, or, all of the other things you can bring, your ego can encourage you to bring to that situation.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's a wonderful, it's just a wonderful gift. Like you said, it's so simple. Um, and yet sometimes so difficult to do. But I think, you know, once you get the feel, uh, once you get the sense of this awareness and what's inside of it, there's so much inside of it when it's practiced. Um, I find for myself at least that, even those evenings when I would rather be reading a book than sitting on my cushion, I come to the cushion because I realize what I get from it.
Mm. Yeah.
I agree with what John and Dan are saying. And to you, John Baker, I would say that the pain and the sorrow are part of the same package that the love is, the love that you feel for your daughter. They're all the same thing. They're all wrapped up together. Um, So there's that. And I also agree that there's nothing that you could do to cause another person to change. I'm convinced that we can't even begin to imagine what the other person is, what they're experiencing, what they're thinking, what their logic is, what their feelings are, what the history is, that that's not available to us, no matter how much insight, how much sensitivity we direct at that. I even think that that's not even available to them, that we misunderstand ourselves on a fundamental level. So, to put it another way, could you encourage your daughter to talk to you? That probably is futile.
Is what?
Futile. The
Yeah.
answer there would be no. You wouldn't get anywhere. So then the question becomes, will she get to the point where she will realize she needs to talk to you? The answer there is probably yes. Then the question becomes, when? And when will this happen?
Time may be running out.
Yes. I watched my brothers and my parents do this to each other.
Yeah, I've been through this before with other family members, and it did resolve eventually. But in one case, it took 7 years. And I just didn't understand why what happened. I still don't. There was no explanation given. I have a book that someone sent me about this, about children and their parents, separating, not speaking. The book is titled cleverly, The Terms of Estrangement, which is a pun, actually, or a play on a term for war, which is the terms of engagement.
Yes.
Right? So this is called The Terms of Estrangement. It's hard to read. Guy's a psychologist, and he specializes in these situations.
We're so
funny,
complicated.
I know so many people who are in this situation. It's really amazing.
It also makes you think of terms of endearment, right? We are such complicated creatures. The pain wouldn't be there without the love.
I forgot about that expression, terms of endearment. All I thought of was the terms of engagement.
Uh-huh.
My mind went to the endearment right away. I thought that's what it was playing on.
Right.
I'm wondering if anyone else has a question or thought or comment.
Just wanted to say, I'm sure that's how Shantideva would have put it too. Terms of rules of engagement. His warrior, from his warrior background.
Yeah, it happens so fast. I'm thinking before this meeting, I was with my cancer caregivers group, and somebody just got the news, which made her very tearful, that her mother was going to have to go on to palliative care, that there was nothing more they could do about the mother's brain cancer. And she was very sad. She was weeping. And it made me very sad. Where my mind went to it made me very sad, because I think my daughter, who's estranged, on her own take on things, and I felt sad that she would not regret me as this girl is regretting her mother. And how fast, it went into that story and into blame of myself. I mean, like that, just like a click of the fingers. Uh, and one other thing, a friend who was a psychiatrist, um, a very dear old friend, said that this is all over the place these days. Children or parents deciding to just let go, cut things off. That he called it's a lifestyle choice that's extremely prevalent right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very interesting to me to hear that from him because, of course, he treats many patients, many families. And somehow that made me take it a little less personally. Although there's plenty to glom onto. I'll just put that out there. Interesting that that should be happening these days.
It's amazing. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 of us at least in this room with roughly the same issue.
Really?
Estrangement from our children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think what our, our,
11.
our psychiatrist friend was saying is something interesting.
Also.
So
So what I'm doing, the only thing I can do is to bring my Vipassana to bear and see it without being reactive, without, I mean, I've already gone through all the possibilities in my mind of what I could possibly do, and none of them work. So I'm letting it go, just seeing it, trying to give up judgment on either side, bring intelligence to bear. Sarah.
I guess I'm reminded of peaceful heart in this situation because we don't know the karmic stuff from previous lives even that could create this kind of situation. But if we can find patience and then turn that peaceful heart into prayer for the other person, then the merit generated for lives in the future will be greater than you could possibly imagine. So you could see it as a blessing and find gratitude for that practice to find a peaceful heart. I'm kind of the opposite situation. My dad's dead now, but he always would stop talking to me for years at a time. And because I think I went through that, I realized I would never do that to my own children or anybody. So I guess I can be grateful that he did that for me.
Wow. It's
wow.
so common, this thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if we count you, that's 5 out of 11. Holy mackerel. Valerie.
Yeah, I have nothing unique about my story, too, with one of my daughters, the older daughter. So this is very illuminating and helpful. I have to go back and keep looking at Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche's book, Peaceful Heart, which I find it easy to read. It's well written. And I have a friend, a close friend, and she has adult children too. Um, Not yet estranged, but difficult situation. And she reminds me as soon as I start to complain or I talk about how much I use the word I. And she's like, "You're grasping." She says, "Do you think you are holding on to what you want you're talking about, I feel if only I could, what can I do? How can I make one wish? Then is like, I appreciate, Sarah, what you're saying. Instead, the Tonglen practice, the kindness, the compassion, the prayer to be free of that attachment. I don't know, it's hard to detach. I feel very enmeshed, and I know it's not healthy. And I see it more often, whether a friend points out, there you go again, or whether my Vipassana awake awareness says, there I go again.
Mm.
I, I. Not moving me forward. There it is. I want to move forward by
Mm.
just being here now.
Mm. Well, you're seeing it. You are seeing it.
Shantideva enjoins us to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, as it were,
Mm.
and to feel what they're feeling, which is really difficult, I find. Every day I do Tonglen for my daughter and for myself, because I figure we're a unit, you know, and there's suffering on both sides. But to see it, a way out of it, I can't.
I think we're all wishing that we had some control in that situation, and hard to give up that we don't.
I think you're right.
You know.
So Vipassana, see it clearly.
Mm.
See what you can do if there is anything, and if there isn't, don't.
Just to thank you on that thought of sometimes it occurs to me, if I were to reach out, how simply, how very simple, elegant, clean do I reach out with a message or gift, and especially to do so without expecting anything in return,
Mm.
is to be completely selfless, detached, spontaneous, impulsive, maybe.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
tricky. And especially at this time of year, holiday season,
Hmm.
when there's a pull, there's a definite pull. But having no expectation, if I were to take an action, send a gift, a message, anything, how to do it very, very clean.
Mm. Mm.
Something to contemplate, maybe.
This has been a very powerful and unusual discussion.
There is another subject we should talk about that applies to this. The Buddhists spend a lot of time teaching about equanimity. So when we come to the realization that we are not going to be able to affect change in another, we get to a point where we learn to accept things as they are.
Mm.
And from there, we can begin to appreciate the beauty of things as they are. Things will be as they are.
I've been playing with this. Playing is not the right word. Considering this roll all blames into one from the Lojongs. And when I first was coming at it, I thought I was going to be making up things that I should blame on myself. But the more I looked at it, I realized that there were many things that I actually did that she has no idea why I did them. And that it's information that she ought to have. I was afraid that she was falling into a drug habit. And out of fear that she would be more pushed into it if confronted, I never confronted her about that being the motive in my giving her very little allowance, that she wouldn't spend it on drugs, and that we did a business that in which she was the designer and I helped get things manufactured for her and ran the business and the bank account, which I did not allow her to have access to, again, because of the fear that it was going to be drug time. But she has no idea that that's why I did those things. So there were very real sort of dishonesty on my part, which was meant to shield her from getting into real trouble. But she has no idea of any of that. I mean, my fearfulness was, unknown to her. I don't know if it would make any difference. But, that is a very real blame. That lack of honesty. But anyway, the whole idea of rolling all blames into one seems very appropriate.
I would just point out that blame is another one of these words that can have different meanings, and I take that that slogan as being more about taking responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rather than trying to some sort of violence, some sort of aggression towards yourself.
Right.
Right.
Well, we're just about at the end here. So why don't let's do the dedication of merit, just as simple that. Anybody else have something? Am I cutting something off? anyone had something they want to say? Philip.
So to change the note of how this meeting will end, and to finish up for Dan, who didn't finish his story, there are two versions to how the end of Shantadeva's presentation ended, and they both mean the same thing. But to bring you back there, he's in the monastery, he's surrounded by all of these monks who are convinced he's the world's biggest slacker, and they set him up to make a fool of himself. Instead, he presents this work. So when one of the versions is when he finishes, he just rises up into the air and disappears. In the other version, which is more prosaic, after he finishes, he goes back to his cell, packs his bag, leaves the monastery, and never returns.
Yeah.
Mic drop. Drop the mic.
It would be interesting if some people saw one version who were attending, and the other people saw another version.
And they both happened at the same time.
And they thought that exactly.
Shantideva has left the building.
Yeah. Isn't this amazing book, though? Shantideva's book. It's just, I had read it before, but kind of just this time it's so powerful. What an extraordinary person he was.
Right.
Especially that he wrote it to himself.
Yeah. And it applies. And also it applies. So 1,300 years ago, right?
Okay, let's end this. I'm going to put the chants up on the screen.
All right.
And we'll just do the dedication of merit. And I'm going to mute all. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence, the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thanks, Philip. Thanks, John. Thanks,
Yeah,
Tom.
thanks, John. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you, John, Tyler, very
That's terrific. Really
Judy,
good.
Dan.
Thank you all.
Paul.
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Thank
care.
you, everybody.
Question.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.